SBC Media.
Welcome to iGaming Daily, analysing the news from the betting and gaming industry all over the globe. Supported by SBC Summit Latino America, bringing together the leadership teams and product specialists from retail and online operators in Latin American markets.
Discover the potential of Latin America's booming iGaming and sports betting markets at SBC Summit Latin America, the premier industry event in the region. Join SBC at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami from October 31st to November the 2nd. Register now at sbcevents.com.
Across the board, industry analysts had anticipated a quieter second half to 2023 trading, in light of gambling PLCs adjusting to new compliance demands in European markets and a combined focus on achieving US profitability topping leadership's agenda. Yet, closing September, all narratives are flipped as FTSE 100 giant Flutter... I'm going to do that again, sorry. Yet, closing September, all narratives have been flipped as the FTSE 100 giant Flutter triggers a €140 million investment in MaxBet to lead its Balkans expansion. And then just 2 days later, Flutter re-emerges as a suitor to acquire Italy's Planet Win 365 in what analysts believe will likely be a multi-million shootout against Playtech PLC and Lottomatica. I'm James Ross, and on today's episode of iGaming Daily, sponsored by SBC Summit Latino America, I'm joined once again by the two Teds, Edward Menmuir and Ted Orme-Claye. How have you both been today? How have you both been in general, actually?
Yes, recovered from Barcelona and ready to podcast, James.
Good stuff, good stuff. And Ted, have you recovered?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Fully recovered from Barca. Also had an interesting trip down to London last week for another sort of conference-style event. So, still quite hectic, but I'd say, fully recovered.
You did attend an event, and I completely forgot about that. So what we're actually going to do, after we've had a little summary of the topics we're going to talk about today, you're going to tell us exactly what happened at that event and what you experienced. So that's on you now. I'll just bring that on you, but it's going to happen. No, perfect. For clarity, I've kind of been off for the past near enough a week with an illness. So a lot of this news is new to me. So apologies to the listeners if we're actually going to be pulling some teeth here, but it's a pulling teeth episode because I need some updates on what's happening. Cool. So let's jump onto the first story, which was, I believe, the first to break. And Ted Orme-Claye, can you just give us a summary of the Flutter MaxBet deal for us, please?
Yeah, sure thing. So, obviously the basics of it is that Flutter has taken a 51% stake in MaxBet, which is the most prominent betting operator in Serbia, for a total transaction cost of around €141 million. This falls in line really with the group's expansion plan that they've been very vocal about over the past couple of years, which is about obtaining sort of podium places and what they like to call gold medal positions in big markets. So obviously a really big example of that over the past year was the takeover of Sisal in Italy. They're now targeting expansion in Eastern Europe via MaxBet. This is also kind of, in my view, indicative of a bit of a trend that we've seen with regards to other big gambling PLCs. Obviously, Entain is the big example. They're taking over Croatia's Supersport and now Poland's STS. So we're seeing this trend of big international publicly listed gambling companies targeting a prominent place in Eastern Europe by taking over well-established local operators. Oh, and Flutter, for some more details on the Flutter takeover, there is a contingency, I believe, for them to acquire the remaining 49% in MaxBet. So, to entirely own the brand if some targets are achieved by 2029.
Okay, so kind of lay on me kind of the significance of this deal, and also why Serbia? Is Serbia a big market to kind of be focusing on?
I'm going to do a bit of a callback here, actually, to the SBC Summit Barcelona, which obviously we've all three of us attended, and as we said in the intro, now hopefully all well recovered from. There was a panel there which focused entirely on Eastern Europe, and the CEO of MaxBet was actually on that. you made a few comments about the Serbian market, how the omni-channel offering there is very strong. There's a really good, according to him, there's a really good sort of crossover and convergence rate between online and retail customers. Retail there is a very strong vertical in general. Serbia, like a lot of other European countries, is you get very passionate about sport. Obviously, you watch the World Cup and the Euros, you see how passionate the fans are. Football has a huge following there, as well as other sports like basketball. That's huge in that sort of region. And obviously, betting is then intrinsically linked with sport. There's a huge following for it because of that. So I think, it's probably quite a strong market for a company like Flutter to look at entering to further strengthen their Eastern European and sort of Southeastern European and Balkan foothold.
Mm-hmm. And before we kind of get onto like the integrations and the enhancements that'll come with this deal, Edward, just give your thoughts on this. Give your take on the acquisition.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was quite surprised because, again, if you look at kind of city analysts, they would say that in H2, the priority was adjustment to compliance in European markets, and then ensuring that you are profitable in the US. That would have been top of the agendas. But the acquisition kind of points towards Flutter needing something more than just the West, especially its international unit, in which it's focusing a lot of its growth coming in from Europe. It needs to kind of expand eastwards, and it needs to get kind of footholdings in Balkans, in underpenetrated markets. Also, I think Flutter always moves with the view that it has the best platform in which to integrate new customers with the Flutter Edge program. So I think an expansion there in Europe, where it sees kind of omni-channel opportunities, transitioning from retail to online, I think it's fresh ground for them. So I think in Serbia and in Croatia, and they did mention this, they do see that as kind of fruitful ground, and one where they can pick up a podium place very quickly at a much easier cost than it would be in Western markets, which we'll speak about later with Italy.
Mm-hmm. And you just mentioned Flutter Edge. That will be integrated following the MaxBet deal, I'm assuming. Ted, is that correct?
Yeah, you'd assume so. I mean, they'll likely be wanting to sort of create a coherent sort of strategy across their brands. I think, which as again, if we want to cite back to the SBC Summit Barcelona, where Dan Taylor is attending, and folks talk quite heavily about the Flutter Edge. They'll be wanting to incorporate that into MaxBet, and obviously, should they acquire the remaining 49%. Given if these targets are achieved, you can expect. I'm sure you can expect the Flutter Edge to be fully incorporated into that brand, and for there to be probably for MaxBet to actually start benefiting quite a lot from a lot of Flutter's funding, technology, marketing expertise, and so on, and on board some expertise and knowledge and lessons and stuff from the rest of its portfolio of international brands.
Mm-hmm. And Ted, you kind of briefly mentioned earlier about the omni-channel being quite a big success, certainly in Eastern Europe, and we've kind of seen a lot of competition recently in the Balkans. We've had Flutter competing against Entain, who acquired the Croatian gambling group Supersport in 2022. Why are we seeing more competition in these regions now? Compared to we see a lot of big news about in the US and like Brazil recently, but why are we seeing more activity in the Balkans, do you think?
Yeah, that's a very good point, James. I think obviously part of it is that Flutter and Entain have both established themselves quite well in North America. Just to reference that one that you've noted, obviously Entain are there with their joint venture with MGM, BetMGM. Flutter, arguably through FanDuel, the most dominant firm in the US. I mean, FanDuel is a clear market leader. So I think that maybe they're just quite confident that they've consolidated a good position in the US, and obviously, Brazil. You've made a good point with Brazil and sort of the emerging markets in Latin America. It's interesting that they're focusing on Eastern Europe when there's this new opportunity, this massive opportunity in Brazil. You think would also warrant a lot of focus, and both of them are focusing quite heavily there as well. But obviously, they've also established themselves well in Western Europe. And at the end of the day, if you if you're focused on growth, you may as well want to just try and seize any opportunity you can get. And Eastern Europe, according to a lot of analysts and a lot of people that we've spoken to and seen at some of SBC's conferences and stuff, it's quite a big unseized opportunity in relation to some companies and their operations. There's some very well established active markets there. The thing is with these takeovers is that, and this again is a point that was made quite heavily in Barcelona, these companies like MaxBet and SuperSport and STS are very well established and have a very strong, loyal local following, and are very well connected to the communities in these countries. And as a result, I think a lot of people think that it's quite hard for an outsider brand, such as some of the ones that Flutter and Entain own. It'd be quite hard for them to come in and challenge and compete against those brands. So in order for these big groups to get a foothold there, the ideal way to do that is by taking over these local heroes or local champions, as two terms that are often used to refer to them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd also say you got to look at the price. They're getting, top two bookmaker in Serbia for £140 million, 40 million euro investment. That really is peanuts for Flutter. And I think the other thing is that when you compare it to new market expansions in North America and South America and what that group will be spending in the next 12 months, it's actually not a risky deal whatsoever. This is a business that's already going to generate, bottom line profits for them. They've also got the option to acquire the remaining shareholding in the business within, I think, what is it, a 4-year range. It's a very, very safety-proof M&A for them. I think when it comes to Eastern European markets, if they see an opportunity and it's at a good price, it would either be Flutter or another gambling PLC, and I think they were first to move on that deal. It's very, very low risk for them.
You say low risk. What's Flutter's CEO Peter Jackson had to say about it, and also when can we expect kind of a closing timeline for the transaction?
Okay, so yeah, look, the MaxBet deal is expected to close in Q4. I think Peter Jackson, again, returning to the M&A scene, very positive on this. He wants this, as Dan Taylor told us in Barcelona, and it's reaffirmed by Peter Jackson, for Flutter now, there's no point in being fourth or fifth in the market. It's aggressive on the M&A, take the podium place, consolidate, become market leader, and they're going to do that throughout every territory that they can. And it's their game, and this is going towards Flutter aiming to be the biggest valued company, not only in online gaming, but across all gambling verticals.
Cool. And round off that one, because time's running against us here. So let's move on to the next story, which was, I believe, actually reported on Sky News at first, and then Playtech kind of confirmed these reports that they were interested, or they've entered discussions to acquire SKS Malta, who are the operating firm of Italian bookmaker Planet Win 365. Now, Edward, will come to you here first. Again, pull some teeth for me, walk me through this deal, because it's, again, I've been off, it's the first I'm hearing of it. What's happened?
So, closing Friday, Sky News reports that SKS Malta, the operating company of Planet Win 365, which are one of Italy's big three leading retail bookmakers, has become an M&A target for Flutter and Playtech. So, these are two main kind of FTSE mainstays competing against each other in the Italian market that is undertaking a long-term reform, and it's restructuring itself. And it's also, we talk about Flutter competing against your Entains and your Triple Eights and its FTSE partners, but it's going up against a Playtech that, as we all know, are very kind of B2B focused, but really need to kind of consolidate their position in Italy. They've had a very successful, perhaps the most successful M&A they've had with Snaitech, and that's now bringing in 50% of their revenues. So it seems like there's going to be a likely shootout for one of the last remaining assets in the Italian market, which is Planet Win 365. And they named the three suitors of Flutter, Playtech, and Lottomatica, who recently returned to the Milan Borsa and IPO'd back in April, I think. So now they've got deep pockets, and it's really down to who's got the appetite to pay, a hefty sum for Planet Win, which they said would be in the region of about 500 to 600 million euros. For a bookmaker that, yes, it is established, but it's not necessarily like bringing any particular kind of new dynamics to what is in play in Italy. So this is essentially just a land grab, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned Playtech and Flutter. Is there anyone else, any other interested parties who might join the acquisition process?
Well, Sky News in one sentence said, Lottomatica might be a prospect. Now that's not surprising. Lottomatica IPO'd in April in the Milan. They raised about 2 million cash. They are a mainstay of Italian gambling. They're looking to kind of rebuild their position against what is a kind of increasing foreign competition online, and your likes of your Flutters and your Playtechs moving into that market and wanting to increase. I mean, the good thing about the Italian market is that the opportunity there is visible. So you've got a generational review of the laws, but also what's happening is every quarter you see more and more consumers transitioning from retail to online, and the opportunity is very, very active for Playtech and the likes of Flutter.
Mm-hmm. You kind of did touch on one of my next questions is what impact would the regulatory transformations kind of have on these acquisitions? Like you mentioned yourself, they're quite positive. Would it only increase the value kind of Planet Win because of these positive transformations that are happening?
I think, look, Planet Win's value comes in as it's the kind of the remaining Italian kind of retail mass market betting group that's still available. And in that, it's just the right time because we've just seen market consolidation, quite a significant bit of market consolidation happening in Italy. We've seen, as you mentioned, as previously mentioned, Flutter acquired Sisal, Lottomatica merged with GameNet, and you've got these huge kind of retail and online omni-channel groups being formed in Italy. And I think they're looking at Planet Win and going, well, that's another 1,000 concessions, an X amount of wagering points for our businesses. How much would it cost to acquire? What would it add to the bottom line? This is kind of, I think, what the executives are thinking. And is it, do we pull the trigger on Planet Win? How much of market share will we take? And how much will we solidify in terms of our ranking in that market? And it is a straight shootout between those three companies as stands.
Yeah, and it's a shootout that SBC News, both Ted and Edward will be covering and revealing the stories, as soon as it breaks. So keep an eye out on SBC News for that. And Ted, I'm aware you didn't really speak much on, or if anything actually, on Planet Win, but fair not, because like I said, you are going to be talking about what you did last Friday. So you're going to end the podcast strong. Go on. Where were you? What were you doing? Give me the details.
It was last Thursday, actually, not Friday. But,
See, I was off. I was ill. Everything's a blur.
So I went down to London to actually, funnily enough, attend the recording of a podcast, although I was not speaking on this one. It was the unofficial partner podcast, the sports business focused one, taking place. It was at, I can't remember how you pronounce the name of the building, but it's the what was it called? The ArcelorMittal, something like that.
I'm still heartbroken you was on another podcast and not this one.
I know, I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry. I've stabbed you in the back here, haven't I? Like Brutus and Caesar. To attend the recording of this podcast at the, I think it's called the ArcelorMittal, which is one of these sort of modern sort of building that's near the West Ham Stadium, obviously the London Olympic Park. And the focus of the podcast is all about betting and media convergence, which is something we've obviously discussed on our own podcast here. And one of the attendees was Sam Sadie, CEO of LiveScore Group, who we obviously interviewed on this podcast. Would recommend anyone to go and check that out. Some other quite interesting attendees. They had Nick Coward, who's the chair of Sportable and the former general secretary of the Premier League and CEO of the British Horse Racing Authority. So obviously someone who's had quite a significant leadership position in two sports. They're probably arguably the two sports that are most linked to betting in the UK, the most popular to bet on, top flight football and horse racing. There's also some representatives from like Deutsche Bank, some legal representatives, just sort of offering their opinions on, as I said, betting and media convergence, the opportunities of it, potential sort of legal hurdles, finances of it. Very interesting. Would recommend people watch out for that to come out. And I'm also planning on writing an article from what I saw there, which will go on SBC News. So it was quite an interesting trip down to the capital from rainy Manchester.
Cool. And podcast, you said you'll do a write-up when it comes out. Do you have any idea of when that'll actually be live? Or is it watch this space kind of?
I'd say more watch this space. Still catching up with some stuff from some Barcelona work as well and some other tasks that we've got. So I can't give an exact date of yet, I'm afraid.
Well, we'll watch this space. The listeners will watch this space, and once it comes out, we'll give it a listen, and we might even review your performance on another company's podcast, not our own. But on that, Ted, Edward, thank you for joining us today. Any links to the stories that we've discussed, I will leave in the description below as per usual. But apart from that, have a great Monday, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of iGaming Daily, brought to you in conjunction with SBC Summit Latino America, being held at the Seminole Hard Rock Hotel and Casino in Miami on the 31st of October to the 2nd of November. If you want to find out more about some of the subjects raised today, feel free to explore any of the sites in the SBC News Network. Happy reading.